Give me liberty and give me a neck.
Hey, I am talking with my friend John Ziegler. Hi, John.
Hi, Annette. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Hanging in there.
All right. Before we jump in to the topic, you are on Mediaite. You write for Mediaite, right? And you're at Zigman Freud on Twitter. And you have a podcast, which I was going to ask you about because you do a podcast called Individual One, right? Which is solely about Trump. And so I'm wondering what's going to happen with that when he exits office.
We'll probably be ending Individual One in the next, I'd say, month or so, depending on what transpires from here. There's obviously still a lot of Trump news. He's president till January 20th, apparently. Although we'll see. I expect a lot of strange things to happen between now and January 20th, but we'll continue doing the Individual One for at least I would say at least the next month.
And then did you ever get the other one up and running? You were talking about a second podcast.
Yeah, that'll happen in 2021. We've been working on that all year, basically, taping it. It's a documentary form as opposed to, a commentary. There was a lot of commentary in it, but it's a very, very heavily produced, extremely long and involved podcast that, if it gets any traction, will blow the minds of a lot of people.
Wow. Well, that sounds exciting. Where is that going to be? Where are we?
We're still trying to figure that out exactly. We're finishing up production in the next couple of weeks, and then, but it'll be hopefully sometime early in 2021. But I don't know that for sure. So
no hints as to subject matter on this.
Oh no, the subject matter will be I don't know even if you know about the story, but in 2011, the biggest news story in America for many years was the Penn State Joe Paterno Jerry Sandusky scandal, and this is the story of what really did and did not happen.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, I've heard you talking about that on Glenn Beck, and I've read some of your stuff about it, and that should be fascinating. I look forward to that.
Fascinating is putting it lightly.
Wow, cool. All right, so back to the present. I wanted to talk with you today because, here we are in November, and I think the last time we talked about this topic was June or July. About the whole COVID thing and the masks and whether school was going to open up. And, I just thought we would be, I thought we would have been wrapped up with this stuff by now. But it just feels like it's going on and on. It's like my girls are in school right now, full time, which I was thrilled when that finally happened in August. And then I got an email, Friday, I think. Well, the numbers are up. And so the kids are still going to be in school for now, but they may go back to online. So it's like things are opening, closing, opening, closing. I have the same thing at church. Our county keeps telling us, oh, well, okay, now you can have more people, 100 people. Oh, wait a minute. The numbers are up. You got to go back to 50 people. So it's like our church sends out an email saying, well, we're going to meet every week. And then literally a week later, sorry, we're back to every other week. And so it's this constant change. Nothing's ever the same, all because there's cases, not even deaths. I went onto the CDC this morning just to check, and the deaths are still on a downward trend. So I'm just, I don't know what to think. When is this going to is it going to calm down when the vaccine comes out? Just today, they said that, they're supposed to have a vaccine. Well, what are your thoughts on this?
There's a lot of topics you raised there.
I know.
Look, my general view is that what has happened with schools, and I have a second grade daughter who kind of is now starting in person, but the in person is actually more screwed up than even the online. They get less instruction by far that way. My daughter's actually been doing her online on school campus, as bizarre as that is, so she can be on school campus with supervision, but from an auxiliary organization that they pay. I mean, it's just insane. We've just lost our damn minds.
Well, you're in California, right?
Right, we're in California.
I really want to know that because you're in one of the most locked down states.
Well,
right?
I mean, even though here in Ventura County, we haven't really, our virus numbers have been way down. They're way further down than they were back when we were more opened up, like in May or June. But we've just lost our minds. And I believe the handling of children in general and schools in particular has been absolutely outrageous. I believe it to be child abuse. I get criticized for using that phrase, but I believe it to be true. I believe that canceling Halloween in the way that they did was child abuse. I believe here closing beaches for absolutely no reason was child abuse. Closing playgrounds for absolutely no reason was child abuse. I believe that what they've done with schools is child abuse. Forcing young children to wear masks in absurd situations is child abuse. This is all child abuse. And the fact that no one wants to call it that, and if you do, you get greatly criticized for it, is nothing but political correctness, because that's what it is. And I am a very strong critic of Donald Trump, but I firmly believe that the left largely embraced child abuse, at least subconsciously, because they knew that it would be helpful in getting rid of Donald Trump. And I will never forgive them for that. I wanted Trump out, but not at that cost. And I will never forgive them for what they have done to children in general, and my children in particular. Children should not have been impacted by this at all. We know that statistically. It's clear cut. I get trying to protect older people. There's ways to do that without enabling child abuse, which we decided to do. And partially why we did that, by the way, is Donald Trump wanted schools open. And that's when the left decided, okay, we can't have schools open. Mm-hmm. Now, part of that is Trump's own fault because of his political toxicity. And that's always part of why I was against Donald Trump, because you can't have a toxic president because he can only appeal to 45% of the public, whatever that number is. But the left still did what they did. And here in Southern California, they didn't even pretend about it. I mean, the Los Angeles Teachers Union basically openly admitted that that's what was going on. And so, but as far as where we are in COVID, I mean, it seemed like good news today. Who knows? I mean, boy, the stock market really thought it was good news. I hope it is. I really do. But we're nowhere near out of the woods yet because we've got a massive political problem. First of all, we don't know when the vaccine will be widely available, but cases are rising. I would disagree with your assessment of the CDC. You have to remember the CDC numbers on death are delayed significantly. Mm-hmm. So I don't agree that deaths are still going down. I believe it is my view. Now, granted, we don't know when these deaths actually occurred. That's one of the many problems with the data. But if you look at the 7-day average of deaths, it is trending up, you would think, because normally there's a 2 to 3 week lag period from the time of a case of coronavirus and someone allegedly dying with or of coronavirus, and it's the cases have been going up now for over a month, so it would make sense. Now, part of that is a data thing. I mean, part of it is we now have a pool of 10 million people who have tested positive for coronavirus. Guess what? When you have a pool of 10 million people are going to die for all sorts of reasons. That's just statistics. It's just math. It's just basic humanity. I don't know what that number is. I've done some calculations on my own. I mean, I think we're, depending on how they're doing the numbers, and it's always impossible to know for sure, and every state does it slightly differently, but I think we're in the range of 200 to 300 deaths a day of people who have been tested positive for COVID who have absolutely nothing to do necessarily with having had COVID. But we're also close to 1,000 deaths a day in general. Now, 1,000 deaths a day sounds horrendous. As a portion of the population, it's barely significant. I mean, it is significant, but it's not change the world. It's not end the world kind of stuff over. I don't believe that there's been any evidence that lockdowns work. I don't think there's any evidence that masks work. I wish I could find some. But I also have to say, and I think you know me, I'm a very honest person, and I evaluate the new information all the time that changes my opinion. this has been a bad period for the lockdown people in a rational world. I mean, in a rational world, what's happened in Europe and what's happened in portions of the United States should have destroyed the entire lockdown theory. Okay. But the media won't do that because they're invested in the lockdown. I'm willing to admit, in fact, I would even in a theoretically logical world, I would make a deal. I would make a deal with the pro lockdown people. I would say, if you're willing to admit that the most recent data blows up the idea that lockdowns work, and you admit the lockdowns do not work, I would be willing to admit that the theory that the threshold for herd immunity was actually at 25, 30% rather than 70% was also not true. I think that it is time, we're getting very close to the point where the low threshold herd immunity people, and I am not an expert enough to know ever whether that was real or not, but it certainly seemed like it might be real, and I was hoping it would be real. I now think that theory is close. I'm not willing to wave the white flag yet, but it's close to being obliterated by virtue of, including, by the way, a massive increase in cases, not deaths, cases in Sweden. Sweden obviously has been a kind of a guinea pig for a lot of reasons, and they have had a huge increase in cases or tests, positive tests. They have not yet had a major increase in deaths. They're still averaging, last I checked yesterday, 5 deaths a day in a country of over 10 million people. But there's there could be an increase there. So, there have been a hope that since Sweden had no deaths for 3 months, that maybe herd immunity was a lot easier than had been anticipated, which of course the scientific community wanted no part of that, because if that had been true, they are damned for all time. They are catastrophically wrong, that none of this was needed. All we needed to do was batten down the hatches, get through that original 4 to 6 week period, and then it would have been all over with. I don't think we're there. So I would make that deal in a heartbeat. If the lockdown people are willing to say, okay, based upon new evidence, look at France, look at Illinois, for goodness sakes. Illinois is getting crushed right now. Illinois is one of the harshest lockdown states with the highest percentage of liberals. It's not conservatives who are running around, not wearing masks in Illinois, in most of Illinois. And so if they were willing to make that deal, I would say, okay, I'll make that deal. I'll wave the white flag on low threshold herd immunity if you wave the white flag on lockdowns working. But I doubt they'll be willing to make that deal.
Probably not. Well, I thought the same thing recently. Where's the herd immunity I thought we were going to see by now? So yeah, I've kind of given up on the idea of a low threshold.
Well, let's be clear. The conventional wisdom was 60 to 70%, and therefore you can't have a herd immunity strategy because too many people will die. Right. And then there was a counter argument that, whoa, wait a minute, maybe because of T cells and cross immunity from other coronaviruses, maybe you only need 25, 30% of the population to be infected. And Sweden, I thought, and by the way, New York and New Jersey were providing, I thought, significant evidence that made a lot of sense. But I think that the case for that is weakening very quickly. Now, who knows what maybe it's 50%.
Yeah, maybe.
Who knows? Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, which, by the way, would kind of make sense. I mean, oftentimes you get, one story A, story B, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. But I don't think it's 25%. Because if it was 25%, I think we would see certain areas at this point that would have zero issues, whatever. I'm not totally giving up. I mean, look at Georgia. Georgia has been living more normally than maybe even Florida for a longer period of time. And their numbers remain static and under control. And so, if I had to make the argument, I still think Sweden is providing, good evidence in that direction, but not as great. And I think Georgia, I mean, my gosh, Georgia has regular high school football. When you watch it, I watch Georgia high school football whenever it's on now, simply because it looks like it's 2019. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's almost completely normal, and yet nothing bad has happened. I mean, they were aware of, and so I'm convinced that he, nobody really knows at this point, and that's what's so frustrating is that we're making these massive decisions with huge implications, even though we don't know anything, and the experts don't know either.
No, and it feels like it's much more contagious than we originally thought, but less fatal than we originally.
Well, I don't necessarily buy that because our testing has increased so much. People have no idea how much our testing has increased in the month of October. And I guess mostly having to do with schools opening or pseudo opening. But let's pretend it's mostly because of education related activities. Who are the people getting tested? They're young people, right? So you're at testing more, you're going to get more cases, and if you're testing younger people, you're going to get less deaths. So I don't necessarily buy this idea that the virus has changed. Maybe our ability to deal with it has gotten better. I mean, there's probably a lot of factors, but it seems to me as if a more logical Occam's razor explanation is younger people kind of realize, wait a minute, this is not that big of a deal. They're acting more normally. They're getting it. They're getting tested. They're testing positive, but they're not dying because it doesn't affect young people. That to me is where my head's at.
And yet we're going to have to deal with this. Schools opening up, locking down, till eventually I have a feeling like our school district here is probably going to go online and then just stay online for the rest of the school year because nobody can handle this open, close. It's like pick something and stick with it. But like you said, it's a child abuse thing because the kids are going to, if they're stuck online for the rest of the year, that's just, I mean, I guess the only bonus to that is they won't have to wear the stupid masks every day,
Yeah, in a weird way, I almost, as screwed up as the in-person currently is, part of me would almost rather just, let's not pretend. Let's not play pretend. I hate playing pretend. And a lot of this is to play pretend. So, I think there are worse scenarios than that. But let's just be clear. It's absurd. It's absurd that the schools are closed. It's absurd that they ever closed. Before our school closed in March, I told our principal directly, I said, look, here's the problem. Once you close, unless you have a very specific standard and ideally a date for reopening, you will never reopen. And he actually admitted to me that he's thought about that ever since then, because I've turned out to be 100% right. It's like a burden of proof thing. The burden used to be on why are you canceling? Now, bizarrely, the burden is why should we have in-person school? And based upon the way the data is perceived, you can't win that argument because you're going to have a certain percentage of people that are scared out of their minds because of the media that are unwilling to go back, whether it's teachers or parents of kids or whatever. And so, I mean, my wife has revealed herself as a much larger Trump supporter than I realized, which has been a little disturbing. But I have tried to explain to her that as unfair as it is, and it is unfair, and it's actually a bad precedent because it's kind of like the worst heckler's veto of all time. As unfair as it is, the only path for the country, and especially us here in California, to ever get out of this was for Trump to lose. Because if Trump had won for the next 4 years, especially here in California, but other states like California, run by Democratic governors, there would have been zero incentive to ever open anything up. And if Trump, let's say the vaccine comes out and it's a success or whatever, and somebody has to declare this thing over, right? Trump had no moral authority to declare this over with 52% of the population. 52% of the population would have given him the middle finger and said, no, in fact, we think this is probably worse than ever because you said it was over. And that's the reality. It's unfortunate. It's bizarre, but that's the reality. If Biden, this is where I've always felt where we're heading on this, we're going to go through a period of pretend. We're going to pretend that Biden killed the virus. We're going to pretend that Democrats did what Trump could not do. Now, I don't know how long they're going to feel like that needs to go. I've targeted July 4th as the moment that Biden declares this thing over, because that way it's enough time for a new school year to get ready for a new school year. It's obviously the July 4th holiday. It's time enough for a vaccine to at least have some impact. And it's time enough, that's almost 6 months of him being president. It's time enough for him to be able to claim that his bogus mask mandate changed the world. And so that is my view. That's my sense of where we're heading. We're heading towards pretend, to where Biden, with his magical mask mandate and the vaccine and whatever hocus pocus his task force is going to do, that they will be able to then declare victory, and then they're incentivized for the country to get back to some semblance of normalcy. And at that point, Gavin Newsom doesn't have any real incentive to keep things locked down. And so I told my 8-year-old daughter, who was in tears just the other day, realizing that Biden had won, because she's convinced that Disneyland will never reopen. I actually told her that the only path to Disneyland reopening before she is no longer a child is for Biden to have won. So, and I do believe that. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I do believe that's
sense, even though I hate it, because the mask thing is, I'm thinking of him as Joe Masks Biden, because this, that's one of his big promises. And already, how most of us feel about masks, especially when we know that they don't do jack squat. And, I got this article by this molecular biologist, and he basically goes into detail about why masks don't work, right? And so to me, they are pacifiers for the scared and mechanisms of control for politicians. And so when I see
they're also a signal of virtue. Don't forget about they're important. In fact, I put this clip on my Twitter feed. There was a fascinating clip on CNN as they were getting ready for Biden's victory speech, and Anderson Cooper and Van Jones, a Democratic, I guess you would call him a commentator, consultant, whatever. They were trying to explain why all the Biden fans were not social distancing, and they were celebrating on top of each other. It's this fascinating clip. You should check it out. And Anderson Cooper is going and Van Jones jumps in and actually compares the mask being worn at the Biden celebration to the MAGA hat. He actually says that it's like the MAGA hat, that it's a signal that we take this seriously. He's actually said that it's a signal that we take it seriously, which I'm like, well, I've been saying this for 6 months now. This is what it is. It's a signal of your virtue and your opposition to Trump. And look, I've even said if there is a semblance of value to masks, that's signaling to somebody that, it's almost like, stay away from me. I'm not down with the anti-social distancing. That's what it is. And I agree with your analysis. It's a psychological security blanket for monsters under your bed. That doesn't mean the virus isn't real. It means that the security blanket doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't do anything except make you feel better. And the ultimate proof of this, and I don't know if that's what your microbiologist was saying, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a microbiologist to figure out that if you can smell smoke or a fart or anything else in your mask, you're not going to be able to stop a virus. And I get, but it's not to protect you, John. It's to protect the person. But it's the same deal. You're talking about particles that are literally microscopic, and if they can't stop a smoke or a fart particle, they're not going to stop a virus. And the data backs us up on this. I mean, there's no place. I've looked for months. There is no place where the data clearly shows that a mask mandate has made a positive difference. There's a couple places they tried, like Arizona, but they put the mask mandate as they were already over the hill on the way down, and so they were trying to pretend that the mask mandate did something in Arizona. But there should be overwhelming evidence by now that masks work if they do, but they don't, and that's why all these studies that the left tries to point to, they're never real world. They're all theoretical. They're all, well, if we presume this many people were going to die or get it, which was a bogus presumption,
Yeah,
and then
2 million, right?
Right. If we use bogus presumptions and then we go and see what actually happened once masks were used, it proves that masks work. No, it proves you're dealing with bogus presumptions that have turned out to be wrong all along. And so I am as positive as ever that masks don't do anything, and I'm also positive as ever that we have lost the battle on masks, and that Biden is going to. I actually think the worst part of his mask mandate has never been discussed, and that is that it is going to cause enormous confusion and division in red states, because places that do not have necessarily hard mask mandates, because now every mask Nazi is going to have the moral authority to claim, well, it's a federal law, whatever the hell it is, even though it's not going to be a real law.
Yeah.
And so then all it's going to take now is one mask nanny in any group, and everybody's going to have to abide by it, because they'll be able to claim, well, it's a federal law. And in red states, or in places that that do not have harsh mask mandates, that's going to cause enormous problems. It's going to have enormous effect. Look what happened with Halloween. In our area, Halloween got banned and then it got revoked. But guess what? Still nobody did Halloween because of the initial bogus banning. So they got to have it both ways. They got to ban it without any of the political ramifications, because they said, well, we didn't ban it. People just decided not to do it on their own. Well, it's going to be the same concept. There was no law involving Halloween that was ever going to be enforced. The mask mandate federally is going to be exactly the same thing. It's going to give the power and the moral authority to the mask Nazis, and they're going to use it, and not because of science, but because of the flaws of humanity.
Yeah, so it's going to become even more politicized than it already is, if that's even possible. Because just when I see a Biden and I'm ready for the federal mandate, I'm already more pissed off than I am now that I'm supposed to start wearing this thing, and I already want to not wear it more. I've kind of gone along for a while, because you think it's at some point this is going to be over. But when you have a Biden commit, it's going to be a dark winter, well, now that what you've said about what he's probably going to do, that we're probably going to carry this out through July, that makes sense. That whole thing makes sense. But it really makes me want to stop wearing the mask now, because I don't want to toe the line, because he's making us do it, So I'm afraid we're going to see a ton of division now, well, as soon as he's in office and makes this thing happen. It's going to get uglier. The whole mask thing is going to get uglier.
And one of the things I will find fascinating is, now that Trump is unleashed, does he spend the next 2 months decrying masks, for instance? I mean, that would be it'll be fascinating to see. Does Trump now, because my instinct is that Trump has known for a while that COVID is overblown, masks are baloney, we blew this, but he was afraid to go down that path, because he was told by his advisors that's death in the election, because 60% of the people have all bought in. Now that he's unleashed, once he realizes he's lost, does that change the rhetoric? That will be fascinating.
Yeah, it will be.
To find out, because that will have an impact on how his voters perceive this, and would only increase the division. But anyway, that's something to look at.
Yeah, I actually hope he does. And I told my libertarian friend, that I thought the Republican Party missed out on a real opportunity by not doing the big convention and going mask free and saying we're not going to mask. We're going to be for liberty. And a lot of people would have rallied around that. But
I'm not so sure about that. I thought that too. I thought that the juxtaposition at the time would be powerful. I now think we're such a wussy nation that there may have been more of a backlash. And let me prove to you or try to prove to you my point. As a sports fan, I thought that the places that didn't allow any attendance at games, like here in Los Angeles, no fans whatsoever, that there would be some pressure once they saw other places actually having fans at games. There's been none. And you know why? Mostly because no one in the media will raise it as an issue. No one in Los Angeles media is saying, hey, we just have this brand new $3 billion stadium that's massive. We're not allowed to have anyone in it, yet, they can have fans in Dallas or in Florida. Why can't we have any fans? There's been none of that because of the fear of backlash and the desire to virtue signal. Yeah. And so the media is so invested in all of this that it's almost an impossible battle. It's an impossible battle.
I think you're right. It feels like we lost that battle, but I'm kind of, even though it creates division, I'm kind of hoping for a big pushback on it once Biden's in office and tries to enforce it, just because it would be nice to see some backbone and, it would be nice to see some pushback. I'm really sick and tired of there not being, like, if I walk into a store and every single stupid mask on, I'm like, and yet I'm one of them. And so I'm right. Hoping that we can see put some life in this again, Let's take
that would be great. That would be great, but don't hold your breath.
No. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to be thinking a lot about your analysis of what's going to happen with Biden and how he's going to, cure the disease magically on his own by July 4th. And I think you're probably right. So
I usually am.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, John. Again, John Ziegler can be found on @ZigmanFreud on Twitter. You can read his column at Mediaite, and you can listen to his podcast, Individual One. And where is that one found at?
You can find it on iTunes or Whooshka, most places where you can get your podcasts.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. Go find me, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, etc.